People who watch security cameras for a living, what creepy things have you tried to forget? I used to do IT support for a charity that supplied housing and support for homeless people. A large proportion also had mental health issues, so there were a fair amount of interesting events that happened. Being in IT, I avoided experiencing most of it firsthand, though I was threatened with being stabbed on about my third day. Anyway, I come in one Monday, and there's an email labeled urgent, saying there was an incident at the stairwell of one of the properties on Sunday night, and could I pull the relevant CCTV footage and put it on a DVD. I had to do this fairly frequently. I skip through the footage, find the incident, usually a fight or blatant drug dealing, and burn it to DVD for the police. The email never mentioned what the incident was, so I skip through the footage, and watch as a clearly very agitated man ties a rope around a stair rail at the top of the stairs, then his neck, looks over the rail and then just casually tips forward over it. The rope flipped him round, and he dangled there twitching for far too long, before he just stopped. So yeah, that was a fun Monday. Wasn't a security officer, but I worked at a 24/7 gas station for a while. One night my co-worker accidentally killed himself while at work, and I made the mistake of watching the footage. He went to the back of the store with a bag of drugs, probably cocaine, snorted it and started acting funny for about 10 minutes. He then sits in the back office and gets fidgety, thrashing around until finally he just goes limp in the chair. He had died of a heart attack and sat there for 5 hours before anybody came in, thought the absence of an employee was strange, and called the cops. It was really weird seeing people come in and act all pissy for the lack of service. They'd just leave thinking someone was lazy. But not. Dude was dead. I work in a retail store, and for a while I work security here. Watching the security cameras wasn't technically my job, but we were consistently short-handed in that department and the manager was grooming me for promotion, so I got to fill in and watch the cameras occasionally. One day when we were reviewing footage from overnights, we saw this teenager calmly set down his shopping basket, take off his hat and glasses, and just charge at a wall. Hit it head on. He did this 2 more times. When he was done, his face was a bloody mess, and he put his hat and glasses back on and just left. Weirded me right the hell out. Was a security coordinator for a large electric company and had access to like 80+ facilities CCTV infrastructures. Was doing maintenance check on some random train station at like 3 a.m., panned a camera as far to the right as possible to check that it was functioning, and this dude was on all fours eating a deer in the middle of the tracks. Watched him for like 10 minutes and went to get the other guy on shift. When I came back, the dude was gone. Rewound it, and the dude stopped munching on the carcass, wiped the gore off his face, and walked into the woods like he didn't have a care in the world. Thank you all for the gold and silver, smiley face. Read all the comments, most asked questions and answers that I noticed. Where did this happen? Iowa. Why did you just stand there like a dumbass? Was late at night at a middle of a long shift, also didn't really process WTF was happening. Kinda forgot I had someone else in the office that could come over and see WTF was going on. What was he wearing? Was kinda hard to tell, as the CCTV was basically filming at the end of its effective view. Looked like he was wearing some kinda heavy outerwear, like something you would work outside in the winter with. It was late fall, so nights would dip into the 30s. Pics or it didn't happen. Part of the job was a very restrictive NDA, as in you can't bring any sort of recording out of the facility. I wasn't even allowed to bring a notepad with my nightly notes out of the office. Plus this was before most people had decent cameras on their phones. We still were using film cameras to do most documentation. I used to work loss prevention for a big box store. We had a lady get arrested for public indecency and I was asked to investigate. I had to follow her backwards from the point of arrest and it was a trip to say the least. She arrived at the store swerving and nearly hitting several cars. She entered the store with 2 young children, both of whom are mentally handicapped. That lady literally dragged those kids around the store, slapping them and tugging at their ears/collars if they didn't obey. At some point she just abandons them in the clothing section, walks through the back doors, to the break area, and I'm assuming she thought it was the bathroom because she proceeds to pull down her pants and shits all over the fire exit door. She pulls her pants up, without wiping mind you, and goes back to the floor like nothing happened. Someone saw what she did and followed her. Luckily there's an officer in the store at the time and quickly approaches her when the associate tells him what she did. Needless to say, she was definitely high and/or drunk and was arrested. The scary part is, she did not mention those kids not one time. It wasn't until I reviewed the tape that I saw they were just still waiting by the shopping cart completely oblivious and afraid to move. Child Services was later called and I still think about those kids often. Breaks my heart to think about the bullshit those kids must still be going through. I used to do asset protection for a Walmart in a very heroin-addicted area. The creepiest thing was seeing how fast someone would go from completely normal to absolutely out of it in the span of a year because of the drug. You could build a timeline of their demise through CCTV pictures and video. One man in particular really stood out to me. The first time I apprehended him he was very polite and intelligent. Just stealing to get his fix. A year later and the 4th time I caught him he was basically a shell of a man. He tried running from me and I looked him right in the eyes and said, "I know you, Gary last name, please don't run." The look on his face of someone knowing him who he couldn't even remember will always stay with me. I used to do IT support for a company that had a lot of heavy machinery moving around inside a big warehouse type area. This giant front-end loader would scoop up material and dump it into a hopper. Along the sides of the floor were these huge concrete barriers, I've heard them called Jersey barriers and mafia blocks, but they are about 10 feet tall, and this one guy's life was ended when the front-end loader inadvertently scooped the base of the barrier and landed on one of 2 guys walking shoulder to shoulder through the plant. I was tasked to review the footage, then make copies, 6 of them, to be exact, and then ensure that the footage worked and was self-executable and able to be run from a USB stick. So I had to watch the footage of this guy get killed over a dozen times. I, too, was offered counseling for just watching the video. Not a job, but my so and I have the owlet monitor for our infant looking at his crib and room. It's set up like CCTV and it's creepy to begin with. I wake up at 2 a.m. and I go check on him and I go back to bed. Once in bed I get on my phone to view the monitor just for reassurance and I see 2 light dots like eyes in night vision in the window of his room. I first shit my pants and I go in the room to check everything out. I can't see anything outside, so I turn on the monitor again and don't see the dots anymore, so I think it could be a dog or something. I go back to bed and wake up again an hour later to check the monitor and the dots are fucking there again, so I grab a pistol and go outside around his room and check the spot by the window, really ready to have to pull the trigger. Adrenaline is on full blast. I don't find or see anything, but the monkey grass has been mashed down by that window like something sat there for a while. I set up a sleeping bag in my son's room after that for a couple nights and I checked the monitor so I could see what the night vision caught, but I never saw those lights again. I'm super thankful it was just that, but I was scared. Edit, I am usually skeptical about stuff like this. I considered lights and stuff and I hope it was an animal, not a person, fucking messed up person, but my son is now 6 months. This happened when he was 4 months old and the camera has been there since we brought him home. The whole time it's been up I've never seen that, and I don't live by traffic lights and no street lamp is on that side of the house. I seriously almost lost bladder control when I saw them again, same spot just an hour later, but when I went in his room and looked at my phone I just saw me and him and black window. It freaked me out so much I prepared to defend my family, but he's 6 months now and I've never seen it again. So hopefully an animal. Not for a living, but we had security cameras installed on the property whilst we were living in South Africa. We had a monitor set up next to the bed so we could see what was happening on the 4 cameras without having to get up out of bed. One night we heard something, so we turn on the monitor and see nothing unusual. I'm ready to go back to sleep, but my partner thinks something is off about one of the cameras. "Does this camera look like it's pointing in a different direction slightly?" she asks. "No. Same as always, and it's back to bed for me." She isn't convinced, so she starts watching the recordings. True enough, footage of some dude prowling around on the property and the camera catches him adjusting it. The terrifying bit? The way his face looked beneath the balaclava. Murder mask is what my so called it. Pretty creepy shit. I reviewed the security cameras around my office building. The cameras only monitor the outside of the building. We have signs posted everywhere stating cameras are watching. You get accustomed to certain movement patterns and activation of cameras, so I don't have to review the whole day's activity, just the parts that show things out of the ordinary. For a while, homeless people were using and are behind landscaping to kick back and smoke drugs. Marijuana, heroin off oil, glass meth pipes, you name it. It's all in full view of one of the cameras. Watched a few drug sales there too. However, the most disturbing by far was the sex. Basically, guys would take the homeless women to that area and do any number of weird and wonderful things. The weirdest of all was when some dude lay on the ground and a drug-slinging / homeless woman sat on a bench looking at her phone. He slipped off her flip-flop and started sucking off her toes. He took short breaks intermittently to hit a glass meth pipe, then went back to work on the toes. This went on for about 45 minutes, then they left. We systematically found almost all the homeless porn stars during the day and told them our place has cameras and not to come back. Things have been quiet for a few years now. Working in a rehearsal studio for bands, we had camera at the front desk that pointed down the hall with the entrances to all the rooms. One day I'm sitting there minding my own business and noticed there was a girl sitting in the hallway outside one of the studios. She had come in with the band that was practicing and I just assumed she didn't feel like sitting in the loud space with the band. So I got up and went to tell her she was welcome to sit in the lobby where there was a couch and TV. I got around the corner and she wasn't there. I went back the desk and there she was, sitting in the hall waiting outside the room. So I went back out to find her not there again. I assumed she had gone into the room, so I went and knocked and they informed me that the girl had left a while before, just after they had gotten started practicing. So I went back and there she was, still on the camera. It was only then that I realized I had accidentally bumped the freeze frame button for the monitor. I had a job reviewing hidden tape footage looking for people sabotaging food product in a factory. The entire idea was creepy on one level. They made pasta, they were finding things like glass, screws, staples, and shit in the product. Thankfully none of it made it out of the plant. They had metal detectors at the end of the line, because it's common for things like metal shavings to get in the product given the machines, so they want to catch that and stop the product. But machines went off and they'd inspect the product to find ridiculous shit that there is no way could have made it in unless someone put it there. That's creepy because think about how possible terrible it would have been had that product ever made it to the public. You aren't paying attention, you throw your shells in the pot, boil them along with a nail, then feed that shit to your kids who just chomp down? Thank God for the fail-safes. Anyways, they need to catch whoever is doing it. They install the cameras in the areas where most of the affected product is made and packaged. They record it all. Then they hire me to go through the tapes on high speed, looking for alarms going off on the machines or anything weird. So I see a ton of stuff that's notable, some of it funny, some of it cruel, some of it just plain terrible. Eventually I do figure out who the saboteur was. But the creepiest thing was this guy driving a forklift around with his kid, not only on the forklift with him, but hanging out of the sides of it waving at people. It's creepy cause at some point not long after that, the guy killed his kid somehow in a forklift accident. Thank fuck the accident wasn't on tape, or at least my tapes. Kid never should have been allowed even in the plant, certainly not on the fucking forklift. And this guy killed his kid. So it was like I was watching a ghost. And I kept wishing I'd had those tapes to review a week or whatever earlier, cause as soon as I would have said something they would have disciplined the dude, and maybe saved the kid. Didn't find it creepy at the time. I was working at a very small bank, so as the IT person I also had the security cameras all showing on a monitor by my desk, since I had the ability to save videos and burn to DVD if necessary. One day I get called downstairs to help with unlocking accounts/resetting passwords. I go downstairs and the employee had two people at her desk, an elderly lady and her daughter. The elderly lady's husband had passed suddenly, and he always dealt with financial things, so she had no clue. She was always sickly and he was always a pillar of health, so they never bothered teaching her these things. So we reset her passwords, and I sat with them for about an hour teaching her how to use basic online banking, and showing the daughter so they can work things out on their own. They were so sweet, it was really sad, but they were very grateful, and when they left, the older woman seems much less intimidated and a little more confident in moving on without her husband. A few days later I found out they were both brutally murdered. The daughter's estranged husband stabbed and shot them both to death, then jumped from a local bridge to his own death. It was stunning, and I immediately sat at my desk and pulled up the video, watching myself have a friendly session with them, talking, calmly sitting there chatting, letting them tell me stories of her husband, some crying and some laughing. All the while I'm silently screaming at the monitor, telling myself to warn them, say something, do something. But of course, I can't. This was days old, and I am just as helpless now as I was then, when I didn't know. Watched a female employee, in the span of maybe a minute, pick her nose, itch her front junk like a champ, then reverse things up and go whole hand down her crack, scratching. Large lady. Then she pulled up the hand to her face and sniffed. Then inexplicably, she licked the pointer finger. I've seen all manner of weird shit, and that one sticks with me. Seen people piss, shit, whatever in the open, or in fitting rooms. Or people getting it on in the fitting rooms. Watched several dudes punching the purple clown. Always weird to confront them. Had to apprehend one for spunking on a rack of FUBU. Worst of the pervs are usually following young girls around, snapping photos, thinking no one sees them. And yes, I mean underage, sometimes horribly underage girls. Co-worker of mine had to have a guy arrested who was jacking it in the children's section while children were nearby. I was happy I wasn't there for that. I'm not violent, and I'm about 100% certain I wouldn't have done anything more than call the police like she did. It's more the frustration that you want to slap the shit out of someone and you know you can't do it. People will do crazy shit when they don't think they're being watched. Not necessarily creepy, but I work on security for a popular UK supermarket and came into work one day to find a note asking me to burn an incident off the cameras onto disk. It was something from the car park the previous night, so I figured we'd had a shoplifter in or an accident in the car park, but no, it wasn't anything as pleasant as that. We'd had a situation where a couple, older white gentleman and youngish Asian female, had been in store and the night security guy just thought they were acting a bit funny, so he follows them round store on CCTV in store to see if anything went on. Nothing really happens during this time, though the guy seems to become more and more aggravated. They go outside having purchased their shopping to pack it into the car boot, when a clear argument occurs between them. He suddenly turns round, kicks the empty trolley across the car park and then smacks her full force in the face out of seemingly nowhere. She recoils in pain, a bit more shouting takes place, but she seems to dutifully take her seat in the passenger seat despite what just took place. During the process of burning this to disk for the police, since our security guy had called it in as an assault, I had to rewatch the moment where he hits her over and over again, but watch helplessly as she seems to calmly get into the car of the man who just assaulted her. Long story short, she was a mail-order bride who was trafficked here, and as well as assault he got done for people trafficking, so a pretty wholesome ending to an otherwise awful story. Currently work casino surveillance. I've seen some things. Most of them not creepy. A few deaths, though. In 2019, I'm amazed by the things people still try and get away with. All of those cameras do actually work, people. Edit for stories, sorry to leave you hanging. One of my all-time favorites. Security had just escorted out a group of 3 to 4 guys, probably early to mid-20s, for being obnoxious and impaired. We were keeping an eye on them in case they tried to come back in. Side note, security has radios. If you're denied entry, your luck won't be better at another entrance more than likely. Anyway, 2 of them appeared to be having an argument and we had zoomed in on them in case it got physical. A few seconds later this dude comes flying into frame and takes one of them down a la the Goldberg spear, or any variation of that. He gets in the downed one's face and gives him a smack, and then he's pulled off and they all go on their merry way. Such a great video to go back and watch when you're having a shit day. We have our fair share of cheaters and thieving employees as well. Yes, you will get caught. It may not be that night, but it will happen. Casinos are built to make money and they track every penny, check, and chip, literally. Don't give gaming authorities any reason to make you an example right there on the casino floor. I've seen it. I've laughed at it. Dudes getting tackled into holiday ornaments, slammed down hard onto that dirty ass carpet. Most of the other stories are just people relieving themselves in elevators, stairwells, and other places that are not the restrooms. Seriously people, the folks that clean that up do not make enough money to deal with your shit, or piss, so find a proper toilet. We have a ton of people who get their slot credits/tickets stolen. Pro tip, leaning your chair forward does not hold your machine. It actually does the opposite. We have career petty thieves that know what to look for, and that's one of the easier things to spot. We've had so many people leave upwards of $1,000 on their machines and run to the bathroom, only to find it gone when they get back. Also, personal belongings, hold onto them if you value them and don't put your phone in your lap while you're playing. I have a pretty dark sense of humor, so I do enjoy watching the drunks puke on themselves or fall out of their chair or walk into a closed glass door. Had one guy that had been asked to leave for being too drunk. He was sitting at the bar waiting for an Uber. We had a great shot of him just letting it all out onto the poker machine in front of him and then proceeding to just sit there with arms in it like, "What's up, guys?" LOL. My last bit of advice, and I shouldn't need to say it, but lock your vehicle and don't have anything in the bed of your truck you aren't willing to lose. Grills, TVs, laptops, tablets, wallets, coin cups, whole-ass vehicles, you name it, it's been taken. Addicts of all kinds find their way to casinos, like a beacon for degenerates, and they will do anything they can to get a little bit more money to feed those addictions.